Hi friends. Hey, I would like to know your views on algo, said Harsh in the Discord. And my name's Rocky Outcrop. I do daily crypto technical analysis, and I've decided today to answer that question. Actually, he asked me as well over here, hey, can you check my message on Discord? Well, yeah, buddy, I sure can. And here I am to try and help with that. So if I just dive over to the voice chat area here, Neverland Text, first off, and I was saying if people want to join me, I'm going to do a live chat to look at this. So if you do turn up during the filming of this, then be sure to ask me questions, of course, but I'll just join into the live chat there, and of course then here we go, and we're live on Discord, and let's take a look at the charts live together. So if you want to join the Discord, you can. There's a link in the description, and if you like what you see here, then of course come back for Bitcoin, Chainlink, Tezos and Ethereum technical analysis, which I'll also be publishing today as ever. That's my usual routine. So just zooming on in here to the ALGORAND prices, you can see it's been a wee while since I've looked at the chart with any degree of detail. And the last time I did actually just bring up the price action for the full screen, you can see that I had a Fibonacci drawn in from these highs up here down to the lows over here. Then what happened after that? Well, the prices did go up quite a bit towards this 236 area at the 0.0 or 0.42. So we're talking 42 cents here area, but they didn't actually manage to break it and sustain price action up above it. If I jump down the time frames, and you can see how that actually looked in terms of the 4 hour, and it's always a good idea to look for sort of confirmation, I suppose you could say, in terms of going past a level by diving down to the 4 hour time frame and seeing if we've had any closes up above it, and then we're going up to the 4 hour time frame, because if we look over at the 1 hour time frame, you can see that there were closes and opens and stuff up there. So you're looking for minimums of this type of time frame. Anyway, what then subsequently happened is the prices then diminished and went down the way and actually put in another low. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look over at the recent low here, extend this Fibonacci down the way, just drag it into place, and ask a couple of questions. Do we think this wick here came up as high as the 236 after we had this low over there? Something to look out for as I move it. And then of course we'll study the other things which are kind of screaming out at us at the minute, such as this white dotted line at the bottom of the price action. So I'll just drag this down, and we can see here that actually this wick got in really close then to the 236, and I would say close enough in terms of coming up here and satisfying this and then actually moving away from it. This would be your most shallowest possible retrace that you could have here, and I didn't get a valid Fibonacci out of this in the downward trend that we've been in since the middle of August, like with most of the crypto assets out there, to be honest. Some of them, of course, have had different times where they started their sort of downward spiral, such as Ethereum starting in September rather than August. But, we've had this downward price action since then. And where did we see the prices come all the way down as far as and over here towards this white dotted line? Now, what is this white dotted line? This is the 200 simple moving average. And because we're on the daily time frame, that makes this the 200 day simple moving average, right? So just a little reminder to people, these some people call them the 21 day and the 200 day, and then they talk about it and they move down to the 400 or to the 4 hour time frame and such like that. This isn't the 200 daily moving average at this point anymore. This is of course the 200 of 4 hours, just so you know that the period actually refers to what you're using in terms of your time frame, and these things will of course adjust to accommodate that. So anyway, that's just a little sort of shout out for the noobs out there. This is what we're looking at the minute, and we've come down here, and as you can see, if I just actually bring the moving averages up to the front, visual order, bring to front, so you can see this white dot right in the middle of that candle for today's price action. Yesterday's one came down, found support in and around about the 200 simple moving average, and now here we are on it again. We haven't put in a lower low overall compared to what we had, and if I bring up the oscillators down below, we can see that the RSI is in a position where it's kind of testing the bearish control. Pardon me, just had breakfast or lunch even. Testing the bearish control zone here and not made it into it. So a couple of questions kind of arise from this. I'll just bring up first off, in terms of full screening up these oscillators, the DMI, just to kind of give us a little bit of perspective on things, I suppose, or that to start off, if we're going to have a bias, to start with this one, that we had a crossover here while the ADX line on the DMI was in this orange territory, which is of course this customized DMI indicator. It's mostly just in terms of the styling of the thing, and it's available for free as part of the Discord. If you want to join up to there, you can get a copy of this and use it on your own charts. The ADX line, when it's below 25, then you're looking at potential chop. But in cryptocurrency land, it's a very good idea to kind of look at it between 20 and 25 and say, well, there's actually, the possibility of this being, real, and the strength of trend existing here, as we saw the cross between the positive and the negative, with the negative one being this pink line going towards the top side, and of course then this sinking down the way and then turning into, below 20 here, so it went red, and then back up above 20, so it's orange again here at this point. Now it's not blue, so it's not above 25 and then really sort of screaming at us, hey, strength of trend. So there is question mark to be had here, but at the same time, that's what we're kind of looking at currently with these two, the positive and the negative, the yellow and the pink, diverging away from each other as yet. So that kind of frames that for us, and we could then think to ourselves, well, maybe perhaps there's still the possibility that we come in and put in another lower low, as this may be suggesting to us as being possible. But however, there is also the judicious type of sentiment here, where we need to be kind of prudent with our judgment with regards to this, because of course it's below 25, and we're looking here at this indicator. This is the RSI, and saying that we're outside of the bearish control zone. We've came down here and almost retested it, but we didn't. Over here we tested it and were rejected from it, as we were back then on the 3rd of September. We've not really managed to do that. We have got a high over here which is higher than the previous high, so we'll check in with that in a second. But if we were to come down in terms of price action, there is the possibility, when the prices are relatively close to the previous low, that we could come in here, and if we did, I'd be looking out for bullish divergence. At the minute, I'm tempted to say, but we'll just remain bullish on this so long as it's above the 200 simple on the daily time frame, and this is just yet another test of this moving average. And when we moved below it significantly, like here we got a big drop down in price action. When we came up here and tested it, there was a few tests of it, we moved away again, then we came up and we broke through it and had significant price action towards the top side. If we're going to just use that as a sort of keeping our finger on the pulse of things, then I would say that this is a key area for us, and that we could actually see a bounce from here and it go towards the top side thereafter, and we don't need to see bullish divergence before the trend turns around, especially when this isn't necessarily fully strong trending price action towards the downside as it was previously back in, say, this period of time just here when we pushed down and tested it the first time. And in fact, the strength of trend relative to that point, now relative to then, is actually less, and we're coming in for a retest and a higher low potentially. So that's quite good. If we come down and put in an equal low, then I'd be looking for a sort of double bottom, at which point as well I'd be looking and asking questions about divergence. Lower low, I'd be looking for bullish divergence, but currently looking and saying, can we actually get a turnaround from this thing on this time frame? And up above our heads we have a couple of areas to be aware of, and bear in mind here then, if we look at this area, if this extension I've just drawn out with this green line of the 236, if we look at below this, we can see that quite clearly we have all of the major moving averages that I use on the show here, the 144, 233, 21 and 55 exponential moving averages, all in this area waiting to be, pardon me again, challenged should we move towards the top side. However, we also have the 50 simple moving average in here up above the area of the 236. So, in the way that we came up above the 236 over here, if we do see positive price action and prices move above 37 cents, of course, that's a huge increase from where we are now, talking about more than 20% towards the top side, then we would be looking here and saying, will we actually manage to break this and go towards the top side? Or will we find resistance at that point and continue to be sandwiched between these areas in this phase here, which, while it is a downward trend, could become a consolidation sort of phase in the market, as distinguished by these lows, highs, lower highs. But then what if this becomes here at this point a higher low and we go in and put in a higher high, that would change things around. Pushing past the 50, I think, of key consideration. If we then actually come in here and just test the 236, or even just test the 50, or come to this zone here of the fake out of this questionable zone, then what you'd be looking at for this whole area is that actually what you've got then, if you kind of just let me get rid of all of that. If you look at this area in its totality, you'd be saying that this phase is a consolidation phase hallmarked by sideways price action, and we have this rectangle format, at that point, and we would be able to look between these different areas, giving us the opportunity to trade the range, of course, if that's the case. But while that would be going on, what you'd also see is this 50 simple coming in towards this 200 simple, and we don't want to see these cross over because that would be a death cross. So anyway, going down the time frames then, having covered off the oscillators, the moving averages, and Fibonacci in terms of this phase in the market that we're at right now, with particular note given to the 200 simple moving average and the position of the 50 simple with regards to our previous high over here, and the major moving averages that we have here in confluence below the 236. I think it's fair enough now to move down a time frame and take a look at this price action on the 4 hours and say, have we got anything that's a bit more positive jumping out of us? Actually, no, I missed one thing. I was going to look at the previous high on the 24-hour time frame. If we remember here, I did say I'd look at that high on the RSI. So if we look here and say that this was higher than this previous high, this being higher than this previous high, what we actually see is a failure to push higher in price action compared to the previous high over here in this area, which of course which has alignment with the 50 simple currently. And then, failure at this point to push past this zone would represent two things. One would be this could be considered a sort of swing failure area where we saw support here, and then of course resistance in this area, and then a turnaround in price. So if we don't push past it and go up towards the neutral line and actually take out the neutral line as well and move towards the top side and put in actual higher highs and everything else, then this would be retrospectively considered definitely hidden bearish divergence at that point. So that's something to be aware of should we see that this fails. And of course, I think the psychology of the market would have a little bit of a negative cascade in that same sort of a sense at that point. I don't mean anything particularly profound when I say the word cascade. It's just, I use language freely. So, anyway, that's just that. Don't need to get too panicked. Some people panic when I say the words cascade and what do you mean? In terms of the 4 hour, just simply means that one thing follows on from the next. When we're looking at the 4 hour time frame, what do we see here? Well, we see a low has come in here at this point, and looking back the way, it's lower than the previous lows over here. So the 7th of October is lower on the RSI than the 2nd of October. The 2nd of October being this low over here, and the 7th of October being this low over here. And we can see quite clearly that that's actually convergent with the price action. So there's not any of that divergence on the go. And we do have this lower high here compared to this lower high, which actually has this sort of equal highs in terms of the RSI here, and that of course is sort of class B bearish divergence. Looking at this area here, and then that kind of underpins the significance of the neutral line here with regards to a swing failure point for us. And we also have, of course, all the major moving averages up above us. We have a death cross condition between the white 200 simple and the red 50 simple moving average there, having crossed back over here on the 4th of September as part of this downward trend. And we also then, at this point here, we had this shaded background showing us the extreme potential chance of volatility coming in, and that did actually play out fully. And when I say volatility, just put a big V for volatility here, what we can see is that this is characterized by this low followed by this high, which indeed was a higher high on the way up the way and a higher low, but then really afterwards we had these lower lows coming in here, and a price action which, in terms of percentages, went up 15-16% or so, followed by then a down of 22%, which actually led to, if you were to have, shorted it at this point, for instance, you could have made 10% profit just from these lows, but you would have had to have ridden through a 15 or to 20% rise to the top side, and that of course would obviously correspond quite well with this idea of the volatility. So I'll just remove that. And then what we also have here in the DMI, of course, is this now in the blue territory, and it has gone towards, it has actually crossed over the negative DI. So while we could say that perhaps, we see a diminution in the strength in terms of the positions of the positive and negative, that the ADX itself is telling you that this is kind of strong at the minute, crossing back over the way and going towards the top side, as we saw over here on the 23rd of September. Actually, I was going to say then we could have seen some more downside price action, but we didn't really necessarily. I suppose this is closer in terms of how this is working between this point here. If we saw this crossing down here, just like that we saw it here crossing just here, and then we come back up again and down again between the sort of the 22nd of September to the 23rd, then of course we saw this downward price action. We put in a subsequent low, but that low came in with that bullish divergence there. So if we can see that same thing happening now, if there is a significant another move down the way, that would correspond fully with what we were talking about here in terms of the lows over here and whether or not we get bullish divergence on the go or not. And of course, if we then see this, that simply just not happen, what we have here is the potential for us to move up the way and the strength of trend to be in place and get a cross here, which is a positive cross, and the ADX strong enough to give us a nice momentum for a move towards the top side. But we don't really have that currently. But what do we have in terms of divergence, given that there isn't any here in the RSI, there isn't any on the Stochastics, and there isn't any on the DMI? Why then could we see this having divergence here on the MACD histogram down below at the bottom? What does that kind of signify for us as I draw that in and show that? Well, if we actually just draw this in between these 2 points here and say, look, we've got this low and this subsequent lower low, and this low and this subsequent higher low in terms of the MACD, what does that normally mean for us? And what that normally means is that you can actually normally tend to identify a falling wedge on the charts. There we go, there's a Rocky Outcrop tidbit for you. I'm sure subscribers to the show know that this was a possibility, that I would say that. And then what do you see happening in this area? Well, the chances are that we could even see this sort of a thing happen. Not the chances are, but we could see this sort of thing happen coming in for perhaps a third touch on this wedge if we go up and down again, and then a move towards the top side, or indeed a failure of this pattern and a move towards the lower side, taking a measured move off the back of it and being very generous of it, taking it at this extreme left point here and using the full thing. It takes us up towards the 233 exponential moving average and this previous high on the 1st of October, where it actually leaves us short though of the 236 Fibonacci retracement point over there. So this is of course just a sort of shorter term price action move for us. Could you then consider this area here to be like a head and shoulders? Well, if we had a prior trend in the lead up to it as being up the way, but in fact we have this downward prior trend in the lead up to that, then you would maybe look for this head and shoulders here in this area, but we don't really have that. That's not fair to say. You could maybe think of this as being... No, you couldn't think of it as being an inverted head and shoulder. There isn't anything particularly brilliant to be looking for here in terms of patterns, whatever, other than just to say that we have the potential here for a wedge, which would then correspond quite nicely if we did actually get a breakout from this even earlier, though, having only had the two lows. What have we got here? We got somebody in the Hi, mate. I'm just recording that episode just now. Yeah, excellent there. So I just had a little chat with people in the Discord, and I'm back here to finish off this episode. And really, what I'm looking at here is whether or not we actually are able to do this. If we do this measured move of this thing, doesn't mean that we have actually changed things around, and it wouldn't be so positive quite yet on that until we really can see this price action result in a change in the momentum towards the top side, and then get perhaps some continuation there. This, in terms of a reversal, is positioned in such a way when you're looking at this and considering things like how this could be a head and shoulders, but it isn't because of the prior trend. You have to bear in mind that if this sort of pseudo head is giving us, a lower high opportunity in terms of the movements here. So what you'd really need to see is a continuation and the build up of momentum towards the top side. Now, could that be possible? Well, it could be, because we also have the 200 simple coming down here and the 50 simple, and we could see these things kind of turn around and get across here, and that would prevent the death cross from happening over here on the daily time frame that we were already talking about earlier on. but of course that is speculative at this point, and what's perhaps statistically more likely is simply just retests of these moving averages before continuation. So we'll have to see how the price actually interacts with everything in terms of its significant historical price action points with regards to, when we actually get to testing these things, if we see play out from this pattern. And of course then at that point looking towards this swing failure zone and seeing if we can move up the way or what not. Now I appreciate this episode has been quite detailed, and the reason why it's quite detailed is because I have mutual respect for my friends in the Discord, and I want to give them the tools that they maybe would benefit from to be able to sort of look at this when I'm not talking about it. And also I think Algorand is a decent coin for trading, and this could benefit a lot of people in the community. But of course this video then therefore lasts for more than just a day, and in fact I would say that if you're watching this in a week or two, that you should still be able to benefit from all of this perspective that we've gained here and we've garnered from looking at the charts in the meantime. On the 12-hour time frame, we can see that there was a death cross in here on the 25th of September. Since then we actually came in and tested the 50 simple and the 200 simple, and we haven't actually then tested them at all either again. And as we can see, extending those two out, they're actually diverging away from each other. So in terms of the positive and negative cases, there's quite a bit to be said. What can we also point to though, and I'm just using this 12-hour time frame to make this point here because it's an intermediate raise. We look down to the 4-hour time frame, that looks a bit flatter. Look up towards the 24-hour time frame, this is maybe suggestive of a downward of this is maybe more sort of obvious in a sense, but at the same time you can see quite clearly how this was doing the same thing on the run up here, where we had the increase in volume and then this big stopping volume here. What we've actually got here in the 12, so just looking at 12-hour time frame where it's a little bit smoothed out, is we have a decrease in the volume over here, but we don't have any sort of pickup to say that there's a stopping volume and that we're going to get this movement towards the top side. So if we did have any movement here, when I was speaking about momentum before, what I'd like to see as well is this to go hand in hand with an increase in volume. If we see that all happening all at once, then of course then we can put on our bullish pants and start talking about upward change and a turnaround in the structure. And if we fail to see that happening, then of course we can see just maybe perhaps while the volume could indeed continue to diminish, what that would potentially just simply lead in for us happening is to have these things continue on the way in terms of the lack of the chop here that we have, or the and with the ADX, and this to continue on the way, or perhaps brief moments again if we in terms of like this chunk here between the 15th for that week there, in terms of negative trending, while ultimately we come in and put in this choppy territory down below. So I'd be kind of looking at this and saying, are we going to see this turn around? Do we need it to come down here and actually put in, this really desperately low ADX before we see turnarounds, like we kind of saw over here on June? And just bring up the price action in June, you can see the volatility, which was rampant here at this point as the prices were really trying to figure out what they were going to do. And then we had the volatility come in here. It kicked back in again for a second at the end of this downward trend here, and then pushed up again. And that's kind of what I'm hinting at. Could this potentially happen before we get a turnaround, or will we then see things turn around sooner? And that is where the pain may lie in the markets for us. So I'm going to actually tune out now, and thank you so much for tuning in. I know this episode's been a long one, but it stands the test of time, hopefully. And of course, I could end up looking foolish. Trading view itself behind my head, if I just maybe hide my head here. Where's my head at on this thing? Image video, where video capture one. If I just hide myself, you can see just in there that trading view itself is telling you it's a sell, of course, as well. So there you go. That's something to kind of wrap up with, I suppose. But there are, of course, different ways of looking at things, which I've covered in this entire episode here, and I hope that serves you well. There's a few other things, of course, I could be talking about, which I'm not doing, which I would encourage you to do yourself, such as looking at Bollinger Bands. If I just hide all of this off here and take up get the settings up on this thing, change my simple moving average from 50 to 20, so this can kind of mimic the baseline of the Bollinger Band. You can see here how we've pushed away, come down to the extreme zones, and no doubt this is tightening in around this area. And I'm sure if we take out the 20 simple moving average in this previous part before, then we could be looking up towards the top side, and I'd want to see this tracing one of the two bands on either side. So you can go ahead and add that to your own chart and kind of extrapolate out what I've just hinted at there now for yourself to see how the Bollinger Bands might give us an extra indication of where we could be going. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave off now and say thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. My name's been Rocky Outcrop, and it'll be Rocky Outcrop in all the episodes that I do today and when I come back tomorrow and the next day. And of course, if you want to share this with your friends, it's dead easy, because you just say youtube.com/Rocky Outcrop, and that's the best place for for technical analysis on the internet. Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode has been a good one. It's been a long one, but hopefully it stands you in good stead for trading this thing in the near future. Thank you so much. I'll catch you then. Oh, aye, and if you hit subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. See ya.